Greg with Boom Up Engineering, and it's Rigger Appreciation Day. Well, it's not, but let's pretend it is, and let's say that you want to buy rigging for a project, and you want to show your riggers that you put some thought into your choices of what you bought and what you gave to them to do their job. There's been advancements over the years. A lot of them are tied to a particular fiber called Dyneema, and it's kind of perhaps revolutionizing how slings are made and what they're good for, or adding a lot of positives to the rigging these days. So what we've got here is a good old standard, at least from the last 30 years or so, is a polyester round sling. These slings probably set the baseline for cost. They're common, they're easy to make. You buy them made in the US or imports. All the big rigging shops make their own, or a lot of them, and they're just they're cheap and easy to find. They're definitely good to have on hand to gear up for a project, but they perhaps are not the best choice when you start getting into the slightly bigger capacities and whatnot. So polyester round, they make them out of making loops of polyester yarn inside this loose fitting jacket. This sling here is rated for 9,000 pounds. Maybe it costs $35. Not a lot of money. So one way to help riggers out, make them help let them show that you appreciate them, is make a round sling easier to handle. Here's a blue round sling. You can see it's got a loose fitted jacket on here that you can slide around, take off if you wanted to. But what it does is kind of create an eye and eye configuration. It just makes it easier for them to hang the sling on the hook, connect to their payload, and not have to get all the twists and turns out of it like these will get when they come from a pile of slings. These will get tangled up and twisted up, especially when you get into 20 and 30 foot slings. Every project should have 20 and 30 foot, maybe even 40 foot slings on it, because long slings a lot of times can be your friend when you're rigging stuff. So again, here is a nearly zero cost solution to help make these things easier to handle. It does provide some protection. If the guys are in a bad habit of dragging them on the ground, that can tear them up. And once you get a snag in these, the riggers don't like to use them. The load yarns get pulled out and everybody gets afraid of them. So now, one thing to remember though, if you do put sleeves on here, you probably do need to pull them back at times and do some inspections. Some sling manufacturers will stitch these covers on here. The only downside is now you can't rotate your sling to refresh the bearing surface. If the sling is always bearing down on a hook or a shackle in the same spot, you're going to get some wear and tear on the cover and potentially on the load yarns inside. So anyway, just things to keep in mind. But polyester rounds, that's the baseline for our discussion. Baseline for price. There are some cheaper slings out there. Nylon web slings are one of them. You're going to need these on your project too, but you're not going to use them for any sort of heavy lift. You're going to be using them for moving, lifting small things like steel pipe, and they choke around cylindrical objects really well. They get a good bite. Pipe fitters like them, but it's not really in our discussion here. So what has come out in the industry is the Dyneema fiber and ropes like Plasma 12. This is a Cortland product, this purple rope here, Plasma 12. It's a 12-strand braided rope. When you get into the bigger diameters, I think it's the 12 strands are divided up into 2 strands, so you got kind of like a 24 strand. But anyway, it's a very strong rope. There isn't much stronger than Dyneema when it comes to cordage. And it's stronger than steel and 14 times lighter or stuff like that. This stuff will float in water. Its specific gravity is like 0.97 or in that range. So if you don't have any hardware on here and you chuck it in the water, this thing should float. So if you start ordering this stuff, you need to put some more thought into it. Like an eye and eye sling, you're gonna have to tell your rigging shop how big you want the eyes, if you want any chafe protection. Jackets, I would never buy this stuff without some sort of jacket on here to protect the rope from rocks and dirt. You can see it's a very loose braid here, and it's easy for rocks and things to get in there. And once that's in there, and you start tensioning, cycling this rope, that's just going to grind. All that grit and rocks is going to tear up that rope, and you're not going to be too happy. I could say that some of the chafe protection, such as this XT sleeve here, polyurethane coated sleeve that's around the eye, very, very durable. I have some first-hand experience with making bridles out of this, where you've got a master link, and you can go directly to the master link with this urethane sleeve and this rope leg, so you can have some super lightweight bridles, where this is to the master link, and then again on the hook end, you go directly from the sleeve, protective sleeve, to the eye of the hook, and you eliminate the thimbles or any hammer locks or anything like that. You just have the rope, the hook, the master link, and now you've got a super lightweight bridle, much lighter than wire rope, much easier to handle, and an excellent idea to outfit your projects with, say, a two leg 20 or 30 foot bridle, and have one of those on all your cranes. It just makes life great if you're a rigger. So you can buy slings like this in a 9/9 configuration, but maybe there are some products that are a little bit better for usability. I've had some issues with length tolerance on these. You've got too big splices to make, so trying to make those splices and get the length to be just right, especially after you've cycled this sling with some big loads, it seems like it's kind of hard to get the length to where they match up very well. Not saying it can't be done, but you have to have a real good rigging supplier or manufacturer that can braid these and cycle them and get them dialed in, so that by the time you get them, they've stretched or settled as much as they're going to, and they're not going to change on you too much. But here's a Holloway Houston hammerhead. This is the same rope inside as that purple Cortland Plasma 12. It's just that it's got a tight knitted jacket on the outside. This is a polyester jacket, and it's coated with a, I don't know, some sort of maybe urethane base coating. I'm not exactly sure, but that seals the jacket fibers in so they don't get fuzzed up and snagged and all that. They can color code it too, like this is a nice fancy green. There's probably a dozen colors they can do at Holloway Houston. So this is their hammerhead. It's getting to be pretty popular in the heavy lift crowd, or even non-heavy lift. You know, this sling is rated at 6,900 pounds, and it is just tiny. You know, it's a 7/16 rope plus the jacket. Here's a 9,000 pound polyester, but you know, just look at the size difference. You know, and that does start to matter, not necessarily on the smaller slings. When you start getting into the bigger polyester rounds, they just get too big to rig to, say, shackle pins. As an example, here's this blue polyester. I want to rig to this 12.5 ton 1-inch shackle. You can see that sling is not happy rigged to that pin. You know, it's bunched in there. You'd have to do some math, see what the bearing stress is, to see if that's okay. But at the very least, you're going to see wear and tear on that sling, because it's now being pinched between the shackle ears and the pin. And with this loose jacket, you know, they find all the crevices, and it's just not an ideal situation. But with the hammerhead, you know, this is not a big capacity sling, but just imagine, you know, you can start rigging the shackle pins a lot easier, and you're not going to run out of space. And you can even double. If you need twice the capacity of the sling, you can double it up, still fit on the shackle. But of course, you start getting into things where wire rope has similar issues. You know, you might want to start having some washers on hand to center up your slings on your shackle pins. You know, shim up the side so things stay centered instead of being off kilter like that. So very good product. So if polyester round is our baseline, from the numbers I see, typically Holloway hammerhead, it's about twice the cost of a standard sling. So that may not sound appealing, but just think about the durability and ease of moving these things around. You know, you can have a huge capacity sling. You know, this sling here, I'm not sure what size this is, but You know, that's probably with a 5-to-1 safety factor, that might be good for 50,000, 60,000 pounds. I'm not exactly sure. But you can easily coil these things up, throw them on your arm, or throw them over your shoulder and walk around with them. When you start getting the big polyesters, they're just a handful, hard to handle. You can't hardly move them without snagging them when you get into the longer lengths. You know, I'm talking about 20 foot, 30 foot. It's just hard to do. So you start talking about longevity, these are hard to beat. So much lighter. Jackets keep the rocks out and whatnot. You need those. But this is where my money's at. If I want to show my riggers that I, you know, take care of them, give them good rigging, they're going to respect it more. If they think you know, if you're buying the top dollar stuff, they're going to take better care of it usually. They're going to have pride in their equipment, pride in their tools. Okay, Liftex Extrema. I have bought some of these and I'm currently running them at one of my projects. They come out of Holland, so that's kind of a bummer that nobody's making them in the States yet. I've heard of rigging shops wanting to. It just hasn't happened yet that I'm aware of. So it's another Dyneema product. So instead of polyester inside, same kind of construction, they loop the Dyneema strands, the load yarns, you know, looks like dental floss, except maybe even finer. So they just loop that around inside this jacket. Difference with this sling is, okay, it's much stronger for the diameter, but also this jacket is much nicer. You see that it's kind of a tight fit. This thing will flatten out when it bears against the load or a piece of hardware, but it's not like a polyester. Well, this sling's rated for 30,000 pounds vertical. This sling's rated for only 24,000 pounds vertical. And you can see the size difference, especially when you factor in the jacket flattening out on the polyester. So again, this sling's going to be much lighter and much more compact. And now what you can start doing is, if you wanted to, and you bought these slings instead of polyesters, you can buy a lot less slings and cover the same range of lifts. Where this is rated at 30,000 pounds, this covers a size of sling above the blue polyester and everything down to, say, a green polyester at 6,000 pounds, 5,300 pounds. You can cover a much, much bigger range with these slings just because they are physically so much smaller. And you can even double these slings up a lot easier. As long as you're meeting the minimum hardware diameters and get the right bearing areas, you can double these slings up and double the capacity. So instead of 30,000 pounds, I got 60. But you can see how it equates to being able to rig the shackle pins, which you do that fairly frequently. You have to sometimes. And so again, as long as your hardware diameter is correct for the sling, you know, this will have a 1-to-1 D/D ratio. You got a 1-inch diameter body sling, you're okay to wrap it around a 1-inch diameter pin. Polyester rounds have they're similar, but it's just when you get some other slings, you got to pay attention. Like wire rope, you got to have 25-to-1 on your diameter ratio to have full strength. But with these very fine yarns and compact slings, they are less sensitive to bending around smaller diameter hardware. So I'd say you'd even be able to make more use of alloy shackles sometimes when you start getting into the Dyneema slings. However, I say that, but it's always good to go with the biggest diameter hardware as you can, because it helps your slings last longer. When we talk about D/D, comparing these two slings, the advantage the Liftex has is that it's got real small fibers in there. This is a braided rope inside, so it's more sensitive to D/D issues. Holloway Houston recommends a 3-to-1 D/D for the hammerhead product. They say you can go down to a 2-to-1, but regardless, you will probably need to be looking at running wide body shackles to make your connections, just to get the to keep the rope, to keep the hammerhead happy. The Liftex is less sensitive. I can't remember what they publish on the Liftex for D/D, but this other product here, the Yale Loops, L-O-U-P-S. This is made in Maine by Yale, and they recently have partnered up with Ionized Sling. I'm sure they're going to get more of their product out now, especially these loops. They advertise a 1.1 to 1 D/D ratio. And so what that means, if you have a 1-inch diameter sling such as this is a 1-inch diameter composite. This is a rope made out of multiple loops of Dyneema rope, similar to a Plasma 12. It doesn't have the same color, you know, I'm sure they make their own, but it is about a 1-inch diameter, at least that's what they advertise this particular size sling as. So it's a 1-inch diameter, and so that means your minimum pin diameter for hardware and whatnot would be 1.1 inches for this sling. And this is a 34,000 pound capacity sling, vertical. 30,000, 34,000, and they're pretty similar in diameter. But that's a beautiful thing. If you provide your riggers with this stuff, they realize immediately, hey, this stuff is different, this stuff is nice, it works really well. Like I say, it's a lot easier to carry, it's a lot easier to handle. You don't have to have as many different sling sizes to cover the gamut of lifting. If all your group had was a stock of slings of this size, 30,000 pounds or 34,000 pounds, that you can rig most of the things on your job site potentially until you start getting into the heavy lift stuff. Like I say, you can double this stuff up if you wanted to and cover a lot more. So what I'm saying is basically this: nothing wrong with polyester round slings. You need to have them. They're cheap. You got to have them. You got to have a lot of slings on your job site sometimes. And sometimes you need to have more of a disposable mentality. You got rigging that's hanging out in the weather for days and weeks and months or whatever. You know, put a cheap sling on it. When you're done with it, throw it away. But if you got a long-term project and you want slings that are going to last, you want slings that are repairable, things that are going to be a better investment, then you start looking at these alternatives. Like I say, Hammerhead from Holloway Houston at twice the price, definitely a good option. Liftex Extrema, approximately twice the price of a polyester, definitely a good option, especially if they start producing these in the United States. I've seen some other manufacturers, but everything I've seen thus far is over in Europe. So until then, potentially consider the Yale loops. They are 2 to 3 times the cost of a polyester round, but again, they seem to be way more durable because you can carry them easy, you can move them around a lot easier. They've got a much more substantial jacket on them. Everything's made out of UHMWPE, ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. I'm not as sure about the covers. They may step down on the grade of that, but it's still a fairly cut resistant material, and that just it's going to speak to the longevity of the sling. And the riggers are going to appreciate it. They're going to know that, hey, this is the good stuff, and maybe we need to respect it a little bit more. And you're going to see a lot less of them dragging these things on the ground, and that's partially because it's just easier to move too. You know, you're always going to need wire rope. This is a 1-inch wire rope. Weighs infinitely more, about the same size of this 30,000 pound synthetic sling, but you got to have them. But riggers these days, they don't use wire rope as much. They don't know how to handle it as well. The younger riggers coming up, you know, this stuff can spring back and knock your front teeth out when you're trying to coil it up on the ground. So you got to have it. There's not much you can do about that. But we need to look at these alternatives. Another alternative that needs to be mentioned, I don't have a big sample, is Tycan chain, Dyneema chain, it's synthetic chain. There's some other makers out there coming on, pretty strong. Deleco is the one I'm familiar with, but it all looks the same. It's this Dyneema webbing that is sewn together to make whatever length chain you need. And this is another cool tool. Let's say you get a 2-leg bridle made out of this stuff. What you end up with is a bridle that's easy to adjust lengths, and the only weight in it is your master link and your hooks, because the chain doesn't weigh hardly anything. And Tycan makes chain up to 10.3 metric tons for each leg. And that's with a 4-to-1 safety factor. You might want to bump it up to 5-to-1. But anyway, you can have a 2-leg bridle where you can easily adjust lengths, and now you eliminate a lot of need for chain falls if you need adjustable rigging. You can get things close enough a lot of times with just adjusting link by link. Like if I got a leg here and there's no hook on it, I'm shackling into my loads, I could just take a link less, shackle in there, connect to my load, and get adjustments every, maybe that's 2.5 or 3 inches there. But it's a very useful product. All these Dyneema based slings are very useful. So again, show that your riggers care, and buy them the right tool for the job. In this day and age, a lot of times that's going to be a Dyneema based sling. I mean, don't forget the polyester and some of the other stuff. I mean, there's other high performance fibers out there. They just don't equate. They're just not equivalent to the Dyneema fiber. You know, Liftall, Keyflex. There's some good stuff out there. But again, tighter fitting jackets and stronger fibers for more compactness. It's hard to beat, or it can't be beat. If you guys have any comments or concerns, suggestions, go ahead and comment below. I'm going to put this on YouTube, and I'll probably use it with some of the companies I work with. But yeah, holler my way. I'm Boom Up Engineering, and I thank you for your time. Sling, don't you? I got it.